Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we're talking about all of Supernatural's special children, from Sam and Jake and Ava to Magda and Jesse and so many more over the years. But first, let's have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with you, Alex.
Hey guys, my name is Alexander Gideon. I'm a writer of dark fantasy, historical fantasy, sci-fi, sci-horror. I kind of dabble in everything. Generally, my writing style can best be summed up by the phrase, "and many people died." My first book, A Web of Crimson, is available on Amazon right now. If you have Amazon Unlimited, you can read it for free as well. Features Aleister Crowley as the main character. Of course, as we've said in a previous panel, both his namesakes are represented very well in Supernatural. If you like the historical episodes of Supernatural, you'll probably really like A Web of Crimson.
All right, and Laurena.
Hi, I am Laurena Aker. I am an editor and an author in two fandoms. Within the Twilight fandom, I published the book Fan Phenomenon, The Twilight Saga, which you can see over my right shoulder right there. I also have created many different technical papers that are seen in conferences and journals and things like that. And then within the Supernatural fandom, I am the co-editor-in-chief of the Winchester Family Business, which is the largest original content fan site within Supernatural. I also have a chapter in the book Family Don't End with Blood, and a new book that will be coming out hopefully in 2021, plus as well various conferences and papers and things of that nature, just miscellaneous writing. So both fandoms that I look into.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write urban fantasy, epic fantasy, near future post-apocalyptic, and more. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. On the Supernatural side of things, I have a chapter in There'll Be Peace When You Are Done. And I'm also now a staff writer with the Winchester Family Business on Supernatural and Walker themes. So really thrilled to now be part of that family as well. So folks, the special children in Supernatural, the kids with powers, and there sure are a lot of them. Let's start with the original gang, and that's Azazel's gang with Sam and Ava and all of those folks. We'll leave Sam for later because, you know, he's around longer. But we had Ava and Lily and Jake and Max and Andy as some of the ones that we met. We're going all the way back to season 2 and 3 here. What stands out in your mind about the special children and their powers?
To me, it's really how varied their powers were, and how for them the demon blood did different things, and there wasn't a lot of real like overlap on what they did, though with Ava and Sam there was a bit with the visions for them. Yeah, it was really interesting just to see the varied like ways that demon blood showed up in them, and how different their abilities were.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Laurena?
For me, I think it was interesting that so many characters were introduced to support Sam's storyline. Mm-hmm. So you had a lot of different categories of powers, as Alex said, but the whole idea was to support that Sam wasn't the only one that was impacted by Azazel's plan. The other thing that was interesting to me as I looked back at them is they were all dead by the season 2 finale. Mm-hmm. So they, they were humans that were affected by the supernatural, but Sam is the only one that survived. Obviously, because he was a lead character in the story, so he had to survive. But if you kind of take it a little bit further, his powers were eventually taken away from him by God when he was resurrected on that plane after Lucifer arises. So one of the things I want to pursue after we kind of develop the character discussion a little bit more, I'd like to talk a little bit about what it was that made Sam different and why he survived, other than the obvious. But if it was the fact that his powers got taken away is one of the reasons why he survived. So all of the humans that were introduced to the supernatural were killed off in Kripke's universe.
It's a good point. One of the things that I found very interesting in the Supernatural anime series, which is this odd, it's official, but it's not canon. So it's kind of got a foot in both camps in that it was officially sanctioned. It wasn't a fan project. It was produced by with Warner Brothers' blessing, but it exists outside of the canon that is mentioned in the live action series. And one of the things that's real interesting in that series is that we get backstory on several characters that we don't in the main series. Meg is one of those characters that we find out more about, but Jake Talley is also one of them. And we actually get to see from Sam and Dean's perspective about Jake and his family, and then also from Jake's perspective when his powers bloom and he's over in Afghanistan as a soldier, and he's caught on a convoy in an attack. There are IEDs, everybody else gets killed, and he picks a Jeep up off an injured teammate to help get them out of there. So his strength is his superpower. And we find out that Azazel has basically threatened his family, his grandmother, his sister, and his little brother. And so in kind of a parallel there to Sam and Dean and, well, what wouldn't you do to save your family? Jake really feels pressured that, hey, Sam, you're a nice guy. Normally I'd be fine with just getting a beer, but he's going to kill my family if I don't kill you. So I'm sorry, but you lose. And it made Jake much more, he's certainly not likable. He killed Sam Winchester, but it does make him more understandable. And he isn't just a one-dimensional bad guy with that kind of a backstory, because that's something that any Supernatural fan can understand. You do exceptional things for your family. So I like that, and I was kind of sorry that it never really made it into live action canon, because I think it makes Jake more understandable. We didn't get to see much of Lily. I mean, her power was devastating. I don't know how you stay alive very long with that kind of power. Ava had, like you said, some of Sam's abilities with visions. Andy and Max kind of didn't make it early. Max especially, but then Max had a really traumatic backstory. So you kind of understood, like Sam said, a little more tequila, a little less, other things could have been them. And that's a sobering thought. Yeah, that's a good point about Sam surviving when the others didn't. Anything else about the others, just in terms of how they acted as a foil for other things? Sam had that one bout of telekinesis, and then I don't know whether the writers thought that they were making him a little too powerful, that would get in the way of putting the boys in danger. But we only had that one bout.
Yeah, it was really interesting. That's when they were talking about Max in the episode Nightmare. And that was, when I saw that, I just lit up. I'm like, oh, yes, they're really going to go there with Sam. And then they did back off.
Mhm.
which was kind of interesting. And I wasn't sure if that was, as you said, because they were making him too powerful, or because maybe he was getting too gimmicky and they wanted to back off of that a little bit. They wanted to keep him more rooted in humanity and the fact that he was a human hero versus turning
Mm.
into a
Mhm.
supernatural. I was actually kind of sad they didn't,
Mhm.
give him more of that telekinesis stuff. That was cool when that happened.
You have to wonder a little bit about, when they were writing the first couple of seasons, how far into the writing that they knew they were going. Like at that time, did they know how that season was, what they were planning to end it with, kind of the battle royale kind of thing that they had there. And you didn't want to give Sam all of the powers that everyone else is going to have, because it makes it an unfair fight. And especially since we know Sam doesn't win that fight. They do win, at the end, and he stops Jake, but Sam dies, is killed by Jake. And if he had all of these powers and he's, telekinetic and has the visions and can do everything that everyone else does, it wouldn't have been believable that he dies to Jake. So I wonder if that was like after that episode happened, they realized where they were going, was like, oh, we got to back off of that.
Well, anytime you had any character who was too conveniently powerful, whether it was Cass or Chuck or Jack, they had to come up with some kind of limitations. How many times did those guys lose their powers,
Yeah.
or just were out of touch when they were needed? Because otherwise there wasn't any drama. Oh yes, let's just call Jack and he'll smite you, and then, well, we're done with this episode in 15 minutes. That's always a problem when you have characters that have that kind of power. Then you have to keep coming up with excuses why they can't just sail in and save the day. The other thing about Sam having just the visions is they were a power, but they also weakened him. When he had them, it gave him a migraine. He sometimes it brought him to his knees in pain. It actually would have taken him out of a fight for a crucial period of time, which kind of balances any benefit you get from the foreknowledge.
But you have to compare him then with Ava, who I think is an absolutely fascinating character, because when she turned evil, I was stunned. I really liked her as the innocent little, victim who had this happen to her. And then when they revealed her to be the mastermind behind all the deaths in that ghost town in All Hell Breaks Loose, I couldn't believe it. So I think there was a great contrast. They used her as a contrast of she no longer got weakened by her visions, and she was able to develop them much further to go, manipulating people and situations and becoming demon-like. So they showed Sam's future if he didn't have Dean as his governor pulling him back. So Ava was, not only was she a good foreshadowing of Sam and a contrast for Sam, but they developed her as a good character in and of herself. So she had a lot of personality that you wanted to root for her by, as herself, independent of being a special kid or anything. So they did that well with all of the special kids. Now you mentioned Jake and his backstory from the anime series. I think he actually mentioned that his family was being threatened, and I think there was one introducing himself, I just picked up a Jeep, and that's how I
They would have been that would have been in canon by the time they made the anime series, because I don't think they made the anime series until about season 7 or 8.
Yeah.
So they would have had that much. The live action definitely preceded the anime series. So whatever was known in the live action was known in the anime series. Yeah, but I did think that having that little extra.
Yeah, they were able to.
Yeah. So I wanted to come back to what you said about Dean pulling Sam back from becoming Ava, because she talked about flipping those switches and how easy it got when she did. And Sam started to go that way once, Dean went to hell and Sam was on the demon blood. And there we saw his power, which Ruby later confesses he didn't need the demon blood to activate, had a telekinetic aspect to it, in terms of being able to throw a demon around or exorcise a demon with his mind. And I always wondered if that kind of harkened back to some of those latent powers that came with the rest of the special children's package. The demon blood Happy Meal as it was.
Interesting, again, using Ava as the comparison, if they were basically starting out at the same point with just these visions that they didn't understand, Sam chose to use his additional power to exorcise demons and to help people and to kill demons. And Ava chose to use her powers to survive because she was put in that, kill or be killed cage match situation. So she ended up having to kill people one after another as she felt that was the only way she could survive. So I don't know if it was circumstantial that she turned evil with her powers and Sam tried to do good with his powers, or if they were showing a base personality tendency difference between the two of them.
Something interesting.
Well, certainly, like you said. Oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking about the demon blood thing. She did say that he didn't need the blood to activate the powers, but they showed through the next season, he doesn't have his powers. And then there's the episode with Famine where he sends in the demons, he drinks down the demons, and then now he's got the power again. And then later on, when he goes to give himself to Lucifer trying to cage him, he drinks that 2 gallons of the blood, and then he can just snap his fingers and kill every demon in the room. So it's I don't know, it seems like there was a disconnect there, that maybe he did need the blood to actually supercharge the power there.
Yeah, I agree. I think he did need the blood.
Yeah.
It was definitely inconsistent writing, if not. And I think also, you were talking about Ava being forced to use her powers to survive. Max was very much the same way. He, after what was done to him, you kind of can't blame him for what he did. But Sam had Dean to protect him. And even when John went off the rails or crawled into a bottle, he didn't have the same kind of problem that Max did. So
yeah.
I think we did get to kind of see glimpses of a lot of potential futures that Sam didn't get. Now, there were certainly other, kids with extra powers. Jesse the Antichrist.
Oh, man.
Those super powered guys that only hung around for one episode.
That Jesse bothers me to no end. Of all of the writing in Supernatural, how did they never bring him back? What happened to Jesse? It's the biggest Chekhov's gun in the whole series to me, and just bothers the crap out of me.
I was almost waiting for an Avengers Assemble moment there at the end of season 15, where I thought, okay, they're going to bring Jesse back. And who else have they met who had powers? Mrs. Butters, the wood nymph. They wouldn't have just introduced her. I figured she was going to be a Dobby character, you shall not hurt Harry Potter. And they didn't. So, Jesse, what gives?
I actually was thinking about that when I was looking at this kind of topic of all these special children. And I really came up with an interesting distinction, which was the special children were all, that we just talked about, were all human, and they were given demonic powers. And then we'll talk a little bit about Magna, who was a human and given psychic powers, but not demonically. She just had psychic, which is kind of a different category. So if we categorize the humans who are given demonic powers or powers by demons, that's one category. And the second would be the humans that had extra special powers like Missouri or Patience or Magda. You know, that's another category. But then you have Jesse. And in that category, I would put Jack.
Yeah.
These were the two characters that were born with powers because one of their parents was supernatural. The supernatural was built into them as a baby before they were born. They both lived, and all the other humans that were given demonic powers were all killed. So the two that were like the bridge, the star children, you know, between humanity and the supernatural, those were the two that lived. So I almost made sense out of it. I had like an aha moment that Jesse lived and went on to do something else, maybe not even on this, you know, plane of existence, because his DNA was the infusion of both worlds. So all of a sudden I was like, hey, I can be all right with Jesse's, you know, big plot hole that never got closed.
Honestly, I feel like Jesse should have come back when Jack was introduced, because I think that would have been a good like camaraderie there of like, hey, I am someone who can also, you know, because I mean, he disappeared and we have no idea how, you know, truly powerful he was. I mean, he was rewriting reality. So he was powerful. And there's also a thing that kind of bothered me is that they gave Jesse a pass knowing that he is the son of a demon, and they let him go. But at the beginning with Jack, they weren't really willing to give Jack a chance. Of course that kind of came back around, but it was kind of like a double standard there. And it's like, yeah, he's the son of a Lucifer, but he's also the son of an angel as opposed to the son of a demon. And you were okay with the demon son, but not the angel son. So,
well, and Sam was willing to give him a shot from the beginning.
Yeah.
I sometimes think, and I agree, I think that Dean was a little out of character, especially how late it was in the series to just be, we're not going to give this guy a chance. But I suspect that I want to think it wasn't that the writers had never watched the series. I want to think that it's really more, and sometimes I do suspect that there are certain episodes I'm just really sure they just pulled someone off the street and said, here are the names, just write an episode. I don't think they've ever, but that aside, I think they needed the drama of having Jack prove himself. And is he going to be good? Is he going to be bad? And if they were both wholeheartedly outfitting him for baseball games and just, you know, 2 men and half a Nephilim, you wouldn't have had that kind of drama. I do think they went too far with Dean's sudden "you're not family" there at the very end. And they never really came out and said Chuck was manipulating my mind, which I think we were supposed to get, because he also pulled a gun on Sam in that episode. But that was just sort of one of those where you wonder if they ever watched the series. But aside from that, yeah, I think, can you imagine Jack and Jesse instead of those, you know, lame local kids that were such jerks, really hanging out together?
Yeah. Was Jesse season 4 or 5?
5.
He was season 5.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, I mean, I think we all feel a certain way about season 7 and the Leviathans. In a way, you wonder if rather than looking for purgatory, if looking for Jesse might have been another way that season 6 could have gone with Crowley. Of course, we wouldn't have had the alphas and everything, pulling in there, but I think that could have been interesting. Another thing, maybe not even a season, but at least like an episode or two, or like a mini arc of, you know, the King of Hell wants to find the Antichrist. Seems like something he would be looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think writers closed it out purposely when Castiel said at the end of the episode, if he doesn't want to be found, there's no way we're going to find him. And that kind of like shut it down. But I don't think they anticipated the really good reaction that the fandom had to Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody was fascinated by him and really liked that little kid actor.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I could write him into the story, but yeah, he was a really, character that would have been fascinating to follow up on.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's not like anybody ever comes back from the dead in Supernatural that they could have made a save there. The other thing, though, that always kind of got me on him being the Antichrist was that Supernatural, in its whole dispensational arc of the seals and Lilith and all of that, Jesse didn't fit that lore of what the Antichrist was supposed to be. The Antichrist would have been much more like the boy King of Hell, the foreseen leader, not. And so they did such a good job at drawing from that body of lore that always stuck out to me as something they tacked a name on there, but it really didn't make sense if you knew what the Antichrist was actually supposed to be and do. So that always, was it just a cool name, or did they change their mind about doing something, or was that really encroaching maybe a little too much on Sam's path or potential path?
Yeah, you would think that he would be, the vessel. That's what he would have been made to be. And that might have been another reason why they decided not to bring him back, is that was obviously the role that Sam filled, to be the vessel there. And I feel like maybe if they had introduced Jesse in season 4 instead of 5 as, one of the seals or the necessary being to break a seal or to break seals, he might have made more sense and had been able to stick around in the story more. And I mean, what's creepier than evil kids? Like that, could have been an entire thing there, taken by Lilith, forced into doing things, and even a driving force of someone that they wanted to save from Lilith. I don't know, I feel like there was so much more they could have done with Jesse than they did.
I'm surprised even if they didn't pursue it as a plot line, that when Jack was introduced, they never even mentioned Jesse's name. So they could have used, just like Ava was the opposite or whatever of Sam, the counterbalance, they could have shown Jesse and how he was different than Jack. And even if they were just remembering Jesse and say, okay, he was the son of a demon, and he decided that he was going to be good and just get off the playing field. He just took himself out of the game. We can't find him. We don't know what he's done. And he has all this incredible power, and he made a choice to get out of it. Whereas Jack was born into the Winchester family, vis-a-vis, Castiel and his mom and, all of that. So Jack was pulled into the Winchester's world and didn't really, I suppose he could have made a choice to just get off the train, but he didn't. And that would have been a great contrast, even if they just put lines in an episode to say, you know, let's
Mhm.
we're against that kid. You know, how one are we forcing Jack into something that he really doesn't want to do? Or should we give him the choice to just go vamano somewhere?
Mhm.
But they needed him once he got good. You know, they needed him. And I wanted to go back, Gail, to when you were talking about Dean, you know, how much he objected to Jack at the beginning. That really stuck with me. It was just totally out of character. You talk about this in a lot of your reviews of forced drama. You know, that was so much. I was like, where is this coming from? And then when he said, you know, you are not family, or he's not family,
Yeah.
oh, I lit up. You know, my review just went crazy with that. I was like,
Mhm.
no way does he say that, because it's inconsistent with, and I went through the whole line.
Mhm.
So, yeah, the whole Dean opposed to Jack thing never worked for me. It really was just, we need an antagonist if Sam is going to be the protagonist. And yeah.
And I could see Dean
Worse.
being wary. You know, you don't bring an armed bomb into your home and not be wary that it could hurt you or this could turn out badly. But yeah, I thought it was very much of a forced drama, which is just, to me, lazy writing, when it usually could be worked out much better and in character with sometimes just another minute of dialogue or action. It doesn't have to take half
Yeah.
an episode. So yeah, I wasn't crazy about that. Um, you know, Jack had the opportunity when he met back up with Lucifer at the end of season 12 at the end of season 12 in the AU world. Season 12? Am I right? Yeah.
I know when you're talking 12 or
right after
13.
Sam got killed by the vampires and came back.
I think it was 13.
13. Okay.
Yeah.
Where Lucifer says, hey, you know, I'll make you a lightsaber. Heck, I can even make you a Wookiee. We can go out in the stars. We don't have to stay on this little backwater planet. So he did have that as an option available to him. And he turned it down to stay with Sam and Dean.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Because honestly, and after he killed Mary and he's bopping all over the world, but he stayed on Earth.
Mhm.
If he really didn't want to be found, how about Alpha Centauri? It's kind of nice this time of year. You know, could have gone anywhere, any when. So that was kind of interesting. Now we also had, you mentioned Magda, who's a truly tragic character, and she really didn't deserve the end she got, which was not natural, and she was gonna go off and not hurt anybody, and then Ketch had to come in and kill her. But that was an interesting characterization. What else is there to say about Magda? It's kind of the confluence of the supernatural meets a mindset that is fundamentally, no pun intended, opposed to accepting anything out of the ordinary as being anything but evil, which is not that far from where Sam and Dean, and certainly John, started.
Mhm.
But she was different in that her powers were naturally attained. She was an evolution. She was a little bit farther along on the psychic abilities than, say, Missouri or Patience. You know, but she was reaching out psychically for help when she accidentally killed the people she was reaching out to, because she didn't have any idea how to control her powers. Kind of reminds me of like an X-Men type of thing. That's why Xavier was needed to teach kids how to use their powers that were potentially deadly. And that's where I fit Magda. She wasn't supernatural, and the British Men of Letters kind of, I think they went off book when they decided they would start killing humans that had extra abilities versus killing supernatural beings. So she was maybe a plot device to show how evil the British men of letters. She introduced the Ketch as a as an antagonist. But she was also a contrast to the Missourian, the patients, and the other people that had psychic abilities, but were all of a sudden on the good guy's side.
It was interesting that the British men of letters never tried to recruit her. Even they just killed her. Even if they recruited her under duress, you'd think that's wasting an asset.
Yeah, exactly.
But prejudice blinds people to possibilities. So, and we knew that the British men of letters weren't particularly nice people. The other powerful child that comes in, and again, not truly a human child as such, but Lilith. I always thought that Lilith as a child was one of the more terrifying beings. That whole thing about having her birthday every day and the adults around her being terrified. And man, first off, anybody who's had children understands that is only a slight overstatement at some ages and stages of development. There are certain ages where if your child had superpowers, it would indeed be terrifying. And then the malice of it being Lilith. But in the body of a child. So where do we put Lilith in all this? She wasn't really the age she appeared.
No, I don't know. I can't really lump her in with the special children just because she was the first demon, and I think it's one of those things where it was more a choice of how to make her stand out from the crowd of the rest of the demons, because you've got your red-eyed crossroad demons, and then you have Crowley, whose smoke was red, if I'm remembering correctly, and then you have Lilith with her white eyes and choosing the body of a child, except when she's got to make a deal, and then we can't have her stay in the body of a child to make the deal the way that needs to be made. Yeah, I can't really lump her in with the special children personally.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I think since she was possessed, the child was possessed. The child herself didn't really have powers. It was just a really good horror story motif of get the innocent looking sweet thing to be the most powerful evil being in the world. I kind of would put her with the kids that were possessed by that demon that was with Ben and Lisa, that horribly gross. I can't even stand that episode. It's so gross. But those kids were scary, possessed. When that supernatural creature, it didn't possess them, it body snatched them, maybe. It had the kids hidden off someplace, and then the demon or the monster took its place. And they were darn scary things. They were terrifying their mothers. The one mother, poor thing, drives into a lake, and they were terrifying mothers. So Lilith, little thing, was terrifying grandparents. And so that I would put them together with the children used as opposed to children who have abilities.
And we had some terrifying ghost children along the way. We had the ghost girl with the razor in Providence, who came out of the painting. We also had the ghost in the one with the dolls. The older sister who had died and wanted the younger sister, who was now elderly in a wheelchair, to come play with her. That was truly creepy, and they weren't children with special powers as much as they were children who became something other than human in the end.
Yeah.
But they were scary.
Yeah. There's also the children in the convention episode, that the scalp happy children with
Mhm.
that they had the impersonator Sam and Dean help them figure out, and made Becky fall in love with Chuck for a hot minute.
Yeah, we had those. And another one that disappeared and was one of those loose ends is Jacob Pond, Amy Pond's son, the Kitsune.
Oh, yeah.
He saw Dean kill his mother and vowed vengeance, and the show was on long enough for him to grow up enough to make an attempt. And he kind of disappeared. And really, Amy would have been a child at the time, or close enough to it, when Sam first met her, because they were really just, maybe early teens, if that. So that was another one that could have shown back up as an antagonist and didn't.
Yeah, it seems like there was a whole set of children used for horror, and they were really good. I can't really think of any that were used or introduced and didn't do the job really well. So, and all the kids that they cast, all the stories that they wrote about terrifying children were pretty effective. They were, I'd say they did a really good job of that. Whereas the special children and the psychic children, they weren't so much children as they were when we meet them all as teenagers or young adults.
Yeah.
Where you can actually kill them, you can kill Max and Lily, and you can kill young adults. I'm not so sure what the network would feel about killing children. So the ones that they all had to be saved, or they were ghosts that were sent on, or but they weren't killed. Whereas the special kids with the abilities that moved forward the myth arc, as opposed to a monster of the week, they all could be killed.
Yeah. Well, and just in the category of terrifying child actors, although she didn't, to our knowledge, have any powers, was Missy from the Benders.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was terrifying in some ways, more than the older people. And she didn't need any extra powers to be super scary.
Right.
The other one that falls kind of into that category is, did she end up with the name Alex, the one who was used as bait by the vampires, but she kind of thought they were they were her family. She started out as Annie. I think it was Alex, right?
Yeah.
Again, she wasn't a vampire.
Alex, Annie, Alexis, Ann.
Yes, that's a mouthful. Say that 5 times fast.
And she did end up with being Alex as one of the Wayward sisters.
Yep.
And Kira didn't really have powers. We just saw Dark Kira from the AU, who had extra skills, but she didn't really have powers per se, right?
There is one we're missing.
Who?
Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin would have been, was he high school when that started?
Yes. Had to be, because he was taking AP classes and trying to get into college.
Yep. So of course
that struggle is real. That whole AP thing, man, I can identify. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of him, but he really was every bit as young as younger than the special kid Sam's age in the early seasons.
Another one that you made me think of actually is Kaya. If you think of the Wayward sisters, and you kind of go through each one of them, the group that they were putting together. Let's see, she didn't have really special powers. She just had developed skills.
Right. From being, Well, we had Dark Kaya from the AU,
Right,
and we had regular Kaya,
right.
who came back then because she had gotten stuck over there. But yeah, I don't think Kaya had skills. She had that cool, Michael gigging sword. But she didn't really.
It took me a second.
Michael gigging sword, yes. But yeah, I don't think she had any magic per se, unless
Right.
she had learned some rote spells or something to kind of protect, like Sam has learned.
Right. I think Patience, if I think about it, Patience had abilities.
Yeah.
And Alex had trauma, and Claire had trauma and skills, developed skills, a lot of skills. And then Kaya had trauma, Dark Kaya had skills. So, but again, they were young adults. They were all the teenagers. So they could do with them as they wanted, and without getting into network standards problems. Yeah. So they, they could kill off Kaya and eventually Dark Kaya. Yeah, but none of them were the terrifying children that had the special skills, or particularly bad luck of being possessed by a monster, or, whatever.
Yeah. Have we left anybody out? Because we've kind of gone through my list.
Well, when you were talking about the special children, Andy had a twin.
Yeah.
His name is Anselm. And again, he was his skills or his abilities for revenge. So you had the yin and yang there, like Ava and Sam. So they used the two of them as kind of back and forth. I think that was, I think that was all of those. I don't think we missed any of those. There was one that got killed right away. Scott got killed in some back alley someplace, and Lily got killed in the ghost town. So they were there really just as, cannon fodder.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's still an awful lot of children with unusual abilities, and even spread out over 15 years. That's plenty to give us something to talk about. Well, we are actually through our time, so this always goes so fast. But please take a moment and let everybody know where they can find you, starting with you, Laurena.
I am on Instagram and Facebook at WinFamBusiness. And for Twilight, you can find me on Facebook at Fan Phenomena Twilight, a page that's hashtag Fan Phenomenon Twilight. I'm also on Instagram as Laurena Aker.
Cool. Alex?
So you can find me on Facebook, Alex Gideon author, I think is what it's under. You can find me on Twitter at Alexander Gideon, on TikTok again at Alex Gideon author. You can find me on alexandergideon.net, which generally has where my appearances and everything will be. It's where you can find all of my books and anthologies that I'm a part of, and you can read my questionably helpful blog at readasthouwill.com, which my last blog post that I put up was actually my reaction to finally watching the ending of Supernatural, and kind of my impressions and how it affected me on there.
Cool. And of course, I'm findable at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest and Goodreads and BookBub in some variation of those names. So if you put them in, remember the Z in Gail Z Martin, remember to spell Bryce with an I, you'll find me wherever I am. And of course, I'm usually here on Continual. And now on the Winchester Family Business with articles. So I'm thrilled about that. Folks, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Always fun to talk about our favorite show. And thank you for watching and listening. There'll be a whole lot more Supernatural coming up on Continual. So we'll see you online.